In today's episode of the Daily Brief, I'll talk about two interesting stories. I first talk about offshore casinos that are after your life savings, and finally, I talk about Tesla's entry into India. Welcome back to the Daily Brief show by Zerodha, where our aim is to simplify the biggest news in the financial markets in a way that's one level deeper as compared to news channels. I'm your host Akshara, and today is Wednesday, 23rd July. Coming to the first story. Just last week, SEBI passed a settlement order which, on the surface, might look routine. But once you look closely, it reveals a lot about how shady forex platforms have been exploiting regular Indians and how regulators are finally starting to crack down. The case involves a company called Toga Private Limited. But even if that doesn't ring a bell, you might remember the other name this company went by, Octa FX India Private Limited. You've probably seen their ads. It has cricket players telling you how easy it is to make money trading forex. They showcase expensive cars, foreign vacations, and people claiming they turned a few thousand rupees into lakhs overnight, all by trading currency from their phones. Sounds tempting, right? Well, that's what makes the story important. The regulatory switcheroo of FX India, on paper, was a SEBI registered stockbroker. At the same time, though, it was also linked to an unauthorized forex trading platform, OctaFX.com, and its associated trading app. Its SEBI license, in other words, was a cover to find clients for an entirely different business, one that SEBI didn't even govern in theory. To understand how wrong that is, imagine a certified dentist using their license and degree to secretly refer their clients to an unlicensed neurosurgery practice. They had a license and that gave them credibility, but they used that credibility to do something they weren't allowed to do. So back in 2022, SEBI had asked BSE to dig through OctaFX's online trading platform. BSE looked into the matter and what it saw seemed unusual. So in March 2022, BSE wrote to SEBI flagging what looked like illegal activity. SEBI then dug further and things just seemed impossible to ignore. OctaFX India was promoting illegal forex trading. When prodded initially, OctaFX India tried denying any relationship with the unauthorized platform. But eventually, they agreed to settle. They paid rupees 32 lakh in settlement charges, surrendered their broker license, and accepted a 1-year ban from accessing the securities market. They're also barred from applying for any SEBI registration for the next 5 years. In other words, SEBI basically shut them down. But that's just one part of the story. To really understand what happened, you need to know how forex trading is regulated in India. So, all foreign exchange trading by Indian residents is primarily regulated by the Reserve Bank of India. If you're exchanging currencies while in India, you're doing so under the RBI's rules. SEBI looks over some forex derivative trading, but even there, the RBI sets the limits of what you can do. Now, the RBI doesn't control what happens in the rest of the world, so offshore forex platforms don't come under the regulator, but it can still ban Indians from going there. That's why the RBI maintains a public list of unauthorized forex trading platforms that Indians should avoid. Indian residents trading on such platforms, it clarifies, are violating the Foreign Exchange Management Act or FEMA. OctaFX has been on that list since 2021. But that hasn't stopped such platforms from going after Indian customers, of course. They would regularly run primetime ads using Bollywood celebrities and cricket stars to promote their apps, and that would draw many to these illegal platforms in the hope of making a quick buck. If anything, these platforms have become more attractive than ever of late. Until recently, retail investors could trade currency futures and options on NSE and BSE. They could speculate on currency pairs like USD INR or EUR INR without needing a specific reason. But that changed in January 2024 when the RBI issued a circular which completely altered things. These new rules said you can only trade currency derivatives if you have a genuine underlying exposure. That is, these markets were only open to those that were hedging themselves against a bigger risk. So, this market was open, for instance, to an exporter that wanted to hedge their business against rupee depreciation or an importer worried about rising dollar costs. But it wasn't open to anyone that just wanted to make money. In short, speculation, even on this regulated platform, was banned. This was only a market for those with real business related needs. The effect was immediate. Volumes on NSE and BSE's currency derivative segments dropped sharply. Retail forex trading, at least the legal kind, became practically non existent overnight. But while the RBI was clamping down on speculation in the regulated ecosystem, these offshore platforms were doing the exact opposite. They were taking in any customer they could get, and they aggressively promoted wild speculation, and the sheer scale of leverage they offered was unheard of. All of this was based on something called CFDs, or contracts for difference. See, this isn't like trading stocks or even currency pairs. In a CFD, you're not actually buying any asset. You're purely betting on whether the price of something will go up or go down. What's worse, this doesn't work like a market at all. While these platforms look like legitimate trading interfaces, the whole deal is structured like a casino. In fact, your trade never even goes to an exchange. They might show you charts, order flows, and even order executed notifications, but none of it is real. The platform doesn't pair you with someone taking the opposite position as you. There's no counterparty except the platform itself. Like any casino, the house always wins. Most retail traders, as you probably know, lose money. So when they make a bet, the platform quietly takes the other side of the bet. If you lose, they win. They pull you in through leverage. And on some of these platforms, they offer 500 times or even 1000 times leverage. That means for every 1 rupee you put in, you can trade as if you had 500 rupees or 1000 rupees. But that also means a 0.1% market move against you can wipe out your entire position. One bad move and you lose everything. These platforms know that. So they sweeten the deal by giving you bonus or seed money, often $1,000 or more, to start trading. You can't withdraw this money, but you can use it to place trades. With that kind of leverage, even a small win hits like a drug. It feels like you're making money out of nothing. And that's what gets you to start investing your own money. And that's when the losses begin. Only once the money's gone, there's nothing you can do. There's no one to call, no real grievance mechanism, and no regulatory oversight. In 2020, our founder Nitin Kamath wrote a blog post breaking all of this down. Many such platforms, he wrote, had approached Zerodha to offer CFDs as well. He refused because ultimately, when customers lose, the platform profits. It could make us money, but that's not who we want to be. Elsewhere, though, it's happening at scale. Teachers, IT professionals, students, all sorts of people invest their life savings hoping to see them multiply, only to end up with nothing. Your life's work can literally disappear within seconds. These platforms even drew the attention of the Enforcement Directorate. They've raided offices and frozen accounts, but there's a limit to what they can do. These platforms are often based in jurisdictions like Cyprus or Malta. By the time any action is taken, the money has already moved overseas beyond the reach of Indian regulators. But amidst this, the OctaFX case is a rare victory for Indian law. It shows even a SEBI registered broker isn't immune. So if you're helping promote or enable these unauthorized platforms, you will be held accountable. The rupees 32 lakh fine, the 5-year registration ban, the shutdown of OctaFX India, all of this sends a clear message to other brokers. Don't mess around. Ultimately, though, these platforms are slippery. They're built to evade the law and they'll keep coming up again. The only real protection is awareness. Remember, if someone offers you a trade that's too good to be true, it probably is. Coming to the second story, Tesla enters India, but is it too late? Last week, one of India's richest areas, Mumbai's Bandra Kurla complex, welcomed a new resident, Tesla. So, after a long wait, Tesla opened its first showroom in India and began taking in orders for its Model Y. But more than the car, the focus was on its price tag, a whopping rupees 60 lakh. This was clearly only meant for India's most affluent. Behind its entry, though, is a long story. Consider this: the Indian subsidiary of Tesla was officially launched in 2021, but over the last few years, it's been locked into a tough negotiation with our country. They lobbied for lower prices, and we asked for Tesla cars made within our borders. Tesla's entry now signals a detente between the two sides. But this story isn't just about Tesla. It's equally about India's car buyers, foreign automakers, and our ambitions to build a robust car industry. Importing a foreign car has always been hard in India. Compared globally, India has generally levied some of the world's highest import tariffs on cars, even going as high as 110%. But why? Industrial policy, of course. One sector that's always been at the heart of Indian industrial policy before and after liberalization is automotives. Our government always wanted to keep foreign auto manufacturers from capturing our massive market before our own car makers could catch up. Instead, we tried getting them to bring their expertise to India. With import tariffs, we created incentives for foreign car makers to invest in Indian factories. That was the only way they could escape those duties. And to sweeten the pot, we would also give them lots of subsidies and tax breaks. This is how car makers that we practically consider Indian, like Maruti Suzuki, first set up shop here. After the 1991 market reforms, although the government aggressively quoted foreign investment to India, we still kept auto tariffs high. We made it easier for them to come in. And we removed various limits for investors to pour in money. Firms faced far fewer rules to source auto parts locally. The maximum cap on foreign equity was gradually up to 100%, tax breaks, and so on. But it was always clear India wanted its own auto manufacturing industry, and global automakers came thronging to set up shop. They would often import parts from outside and assemble the final car in India. These industries all clustered in a few parts of India. Chennai, in fact, was likened to Detroit at its peak. Despite the more favorable investment climate, however, sometimes our laws were just too restrictive. Many car companies that came in suffered high profile failures, causing them to exit their India business entirely. India's graveyard of foreign cars. So consider Ford. In 1995, Ford entered India, spinning off its own subsidiary by 1998. However, their entry was based on a faulty assumption that the Indian consumer would buy what they already sold, that there was no need to change their cars. But that wasn't what India wanted. In the 2000s, we flocked to buy smaller cars. We wanted a lot of bang for our buck, and we wanted to know that we could sell our cars secondhand. And most importantly, those cars needed to be suited to Indian roads. Ford neglected this and hit many bumps in their journey to sell in India. It entered with the Ford Escort, a large, expensive sedan that was built for driving on the right side of the road. It didn't fare well. Eventually, Ford embraced smaller, India specific models like the Icon, but it was still too expensive to maintain with pricey spare parts that were rarely available. Their competitors like Maruti Suzuki and Hyundai had wider, cheaper product lines. Eventually, Ford ran out of steam and in 2021, it made its exit. This left thousands of workers jobless and plenty of car dealers unhappy with how these exits spoiled their own investments. Now, this is just one story. General Motors, Fiat, Daewoo, Mitsubishi, there's a long list of companies that fail to make the slightest dent in our tough, highly competitive market. So, where all these have failed, can Tesla do any better? If anything, Tesla has entered India at a much more significant disadvantage compared to companies like Ford. The Model Y has been slapped with a whopping 70% import tariff, and that's why the retail price is so high. Tesla, of course, has been lobbying for lower import duties so that it can prove that there's a market for its cars in India. Elon Musk has even expressed his unhappiness at our tariffs before. But that isn't easy. India is committed to its industrial policy. The only way Tesla's cars get cheaper is if it starts manufacturing in India. That's the base condition for any tariff cuts. The Indian government promises much lower import duties, 15%, to all foreign EV manufacturers. But in exchange, they must fulfill three major conditions: invest at least $500 million in India within 3 years, achieve 25% domestic value addition by year 3 of operations, and 50% by year 5, post a bank guarantee equivalent to the total duties foregone over 5 years, or $500 million, whichever is lower, which can be seized on non compliance. These conditions, if anything, are certainly stricter than anything Ford had to face. They mark a shift in how India has decided to approach foreign car makers. Earlier, incentives were offered to encourage foreign automakers to achieve targets. But now the script has flipped on its head. Incentives will only be provided if those targets are first met. So, will Tesla agree to these terms? That seems unlikely. Union Minister H.D. Kumaraswamy said last month that Tesla is still unwilling to set up a manufacturing unit in India. So far, Tesla's playbook seems like that of Ford from 2 decades ago. Tesla is using global designs for its India entry. It hasn't made any India specific modifications, perhaps because they don't even have an Indian manufacturing unit. It's also making only one model available in India right now, while generally sporting a limited portfolio of models. But can Tesla succeed where Ford didn't? Tesla has one thing that Ford did not: It's betting on India's growing population of millionaires. India now has a constituency for luxury cars that just didn't exist before. Luxury car sales in India crossed 50,000 units last year, growing at 20%, double the pace of mainstream cars in 2023. That same year, Mercedes Benz India recorded its highest annual sales in India. And they still seem to have pricing power. In fact, the average selling price of their cars in India has gone up from rupees 57 lakh to rupees 88 lakh since 2020. And within the luxury segment itself, EVs are doing pretty well. Between January and May 2025, luxury EV sales surged by 66%, accounting for 11% of all luxury car sales. This growth is happening despite import duties, which are much higher for luxury cars than mainstream ones. And this is the wave Tesla thinks it can ride. They're so confident, in fact, that they're willing to build their own EV charging stations in Tier 1 Indian cities, promising 4 in Mumbai. So, is this hope justified? At its current price point, not only is Tesla competing with Indian EVs, it's also steering clear of other foreign mass EV makers like BYD. The Sea-Lion 7, which is BYD's most expensive offering in India, is still rupees 6 lakh lower than Tesla's cheapest offering, while the price of the best version of Tata Harrier falls within rupees 30 lakh. Industry experts believe that Tesla is relying on its brand name rather than its features to do the heavy lifting. Elon Musk's name, it bets, can draw a crowd. Moreover, Indian consumers are uncomfortable buying Chinese cars, Tesla's biggest rivals, due to tensions between both countries. And Tesla is betting that these will, together, allow it to fetch a premium. But with such a strategy, it's essentially focusing on an extremely small population of India, and it's arguably not catering to their needs either. It's yet to build service centers in India. Meanwhile, getting to the larger market of middle class Indians is a different ballgame altogether, which it isn't even trying to play. So, is Tesla's biggest hope India? Outside India, a storm threatens to engulf Tesla. The company's share of global EV sales has been falling rapidly. Even in its home country, the US, its electric vehicle market share has fallen from 75% in 2022 to 50% in 2024. This year, it recorded one of the biggest sales decline in the company's entire history while marking its first ever decline in back-to-back years. Profits have crashed by a scary 71% since last year as Chinese EV companies fight tooth and nail by cutting costs and starting price wars globally. Tesla's inventory, in fact, is full of unsold cars. At one point, its stock fell so severely that JP Morgan said that it can't find a similar instance in the entire history of cars. Now, Tesla needs to tap into a new big market and fast. After China, India is probably its only hope. If anything, Tesla is probably more dependent on India than the other way around. Meanwhile, India's policy towards EVs has been working pretty well. Earlier, we covered India's FAME scheme for homegrown EVs, which have contributed to a 2x jump to nearly 1.5 lakh four-wheeler units sold. Companies like Tata and Mahindra were big beneficiaries of this scheme and are now major players in the space. Meanwhile, a company like JSW MG Motors practically emerged as another key player from nowhere. Our EV scheme has since evolved to allow more foreign competition. But while Tesla hasn't taken advantage of it yet, other foreign companies are doing exactly that. There's a lot of interest from companies like Skoda, Volkswagen, Hyundai, and Kia. Many of them also enjoy strong customer loyalty with a strong track record in our mass consumer market. So, does Tesla risk being late to India's EV gold rush? This could well be one of the most important questions for the company's survival. Now, coming to the tidbits. China's rare earth squeeze just got worse. So, Foxconn's AirPods plant in Telangana is facing production disruptions, and the culprit is dysprosium. Dysprosium, one of the 7 rare earth elements now under China's export control, is a key component in the magnets used inside AirPods. While Foxconn has downplayed the disruption, reports say the company has flagged the issue to the Telangana government and sought help securing end user certificates or EUCs, the paperwork China now demands for approving rare earth exports. Now, coming to the next tidbit. India's clean energy surge is real, but so is the coal reality. In a bright spot, India added a record 22 gigawatts of renewable capacity in the first half of 2025, up 56% from last year. That's brought India's total non-fossil energy capacity above fossil fuels for the first time. It's a major milestone for a company trying to hit 500 gigawatts of clean capacity by 2030. But before we can celebrate, here's the catch. Capacity is not generation. Despite the optics, coal still powers nearly 75% of India's electricity. That dominance will remain unless there's massive, urgent investment in energy storage and grid upgrades to handle intermittent solar and wind. Now, coming to the next tidbit. SEBI has lifted trading restrictions on US firm Jane Street after the company deposited $567 million into an escrow account. The firm is now allowed to resume trading, excluding options, while SEBI continues its investigations into alleged market manipulation. Now, coming to the final tidbit. We love talking about industrial policies. Delhi's government has unveiled a draft industrial policy for 2025-35 aiming to boost the service sector through a rupees 400 crore venture capital fund and capital investment reimbursements. The policy targets frontier tech, R&D, and hospitality, offering incentives like GST reimbursement and subsidies to promote a business-friendly environment. That's all the news I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next one.
Disclaimer: this content is for informational purposes only. None of the stocks, brands, or products mentioned are recommendations or endorsements.